We've been talking about this many times. It's been more than a year. President Putin has been consistently repeating this. During all his speeches, he was giving exhaustive and extensive responses. An agreement had been reached. It was already there at the end of March in Istanbul, following several rounds of talks. 3 rounds in Belarus, followed by the final round in Istanbul. An agreement had been reached, and this was confirmed by one of the participants of those talks, who is currently the head of the Zelensky parliamentary group in the Verkhovna Rada, Mr. David Arachamia. He was one of the members of the Ukrainian delegation in Istanbul. And in his recent interview, he said that everything was essentially ready. An agreement had been reached. But then he said that in retrospect, he could understand that there was much to win from that. But then Boris Johnson came and said, no, you should continue the war. It is a known fact now. We've been talking about this, and the Ukrainians have confirmed that too. So far, we cannot see any signals, neither from Kiev or its Western patrons. We see no signal of their readiness to proceed to the political talks. Moreover, President Zelensky signed a special decree 18 months ago prohibiting any talks with the Putin government. This is now a crime in Ukraine, and he has no intention of cancelling that decree. If you listen to what they're saying, if you listen to the Secretary Generals and leaders of NATO and the European Union, there's only one thing they keep repeating. They say that they must support Ukraine. If Ukraine is defeated, this would mean the defeat for the entire West. And recently they started to add that after Ukraine, Russia and Putin wouldn't stop and move on into the Baltics, Poland and other neighboring countries. And this wasn't just some marginal politician. This was the head of Pentagon, Mr. Lloyd Austin. He said that Russia wouldn't stop at Ukraine. That's why they had no right of losing the war. They're not hiding the fact that they are continuing this war with the intention to win. In order to begin the political process, it takes 2, just like in tango. But the guys on the other side are not dancing the tango, they're doing the break dancing and dancing it solo. Of course, we're trying to understand the responses to the questions that we've been consistently asking our Western colleagues, including yesterday during my speech. Yesterday, I quoted the Ukrainian constitution, which is still active, and it was used to swear in by President Zelensky and Poroshenko. The constitution of Ukraine gives the list of the obligations by the state of Ukraine, the rights that they guarantee for the Russians and other national minorities. The constitution guarantees their rights to their language. It guarantees to consolidate the Ukrainian nation, its historical mind, traditions and cultures, the ethnical and linguistic and religious identity. The constitution prohibits the limitation of existing rights and freedoms. It says that there shall be no ethnical or language or other privileges. It guarantees the right for education in your mother tongue. If you compare the provisions of the Ukrainian constitution and what they're actually doing against the Russian language and against the Russians themselves, the ethnic Russians, the Ukrainian citizens, I have no idea why the honest journalists are not pursuing that, including our German colleagues. You've never even considered this, or if you considered, you stayed silent. That's just one example. Back in February, after the coup d'etat, at the same moment, they declared their first step, their intention to cancel the status of the Russian language in Ukraine. That was their first declaration in February 2014, when they seized the power, disregarding Germany, France and Poland, whose ministers gave their guarantees under the settlement agreement between the opposition and the president of Ukraine. The opposition completely disregarded those agreements and seized the power. Later, we were asking our German and French colleagues why they didn't call the Ukrainian opposition to order. But we didn't receive a clear answer, only hints saying that sometimes democracy takes unusual forms, something like that. By the way, exactly in 2014, there was an attempted coup d'etat in Gambia, a country in Africa. It was a failed attempt, but the US State Department made a very strict statement saying that the United States would never confirm and would never recognize the unconstitutional authorities. Compare that with the coup d'etat in Yemen. The Yemeni president escaped to Saudi Arabia. For many years, the entirety of the progressive Western community was demanding that the president come back to power in Yemen, to make sure he could continue his rule. For 7 years, they've been pursuing that. Then they made a decision to create a transition presidential council. We were asking them, why are you supporting the president of Yemen, while President Yanukovych, who fell victim to a coup d'etat and who was also a legitimate head of the UN member state, why weren't you demanding his return to recommence the political process? Well, we were told that he left Kiev, he fled to Kharkiv, and everyone knew that there was a congress of his party there. But this doesn't justify the double standards of our Western friends. In Ukraine, they needed the anti-Russian neo-Nazi coup. In Yemen, they needed to fight for the regime that existed there. That's it.